All right, this video is going to be the first video in the series about aggression. So this is for a social psychology class, and this chapter kind of comes towards the end of the semester in that class typically, and it's one of those chapters where I'm not going to cover everything in the chapter. I'm going to cover kind of the core topics that I think students would be interested in and would be most relevant to their later classes and later, job experiences and whatnot. So first of all, we have to define aggression. So a lot of us probably think, well, I know what aggression is. I know it when I see it. But what is the official definition? Aggression is behavior intended to harm others who do not wish to be harmed. Because if they wish to be harmed, that's a different thing entirely. Now, when we say harm, this does not necessarily mean physical harm. You can have verbal, emotional harm. So this includes something that's probably obviously aggression, like punching somebody, or it can also include gossiping at work or in classes, and also online troll behavior. That counts as aggressive behavior, aggression, or like trash talking on an online gaming experience where you've got the mic on and you're saying nasty things to players. That has the potential for causing harm too. And they're not like, oh, please trash talk me. Please say mean things about me and question my abilities. All right, so that counts as aggression too. So there's a wide variety of behaviors that count as aggression. Now, when we study aggression, one thing that we can do is talk about different types of aggression. We can create something called a typology. Just a fancy word for, hey, we create groups, we create categories. It's a categorical system that helps us think more clearly about complex but related events. Because when we conduct research on aggression, one thing that we find is it is often very relevant, very important to talk about the specific type of aggression that is being observed. You can't just say something as simple as, well, aggression leads to this outcome. It's like, it's more accurate to say, well, this specific type of aggression is correlated, is linked, is related to a specific type of outcome. So, what are some ways that we can create typologies? You can create a descriptive typology, and this just describes the basic form of the aggression. And so we can break aggression down descriptively by saying, is it physical or verbal? Right? Those are two categories: physical aggression versus verbal aggression. Direct or indirect. All right, because sometimes we aggress in a way that's directly targeted a person. They know it's coming from you, because they're like, oh, well, there you are, you're doing this. You can also be indirect. Like you can start a little rumor that you tell somebody else something, and then they behave towards somebody else. You've just indirectly harmed them through, starting that rumor. You can start events in place that would be harmful to somebody. Like you could sabotage the area where they're going to. You could sabotage in some way so something's likely to fall. You didn't directly throw something at them, but you set it up so that they could be harmed that way. Now, you can also have active or passive. And with, you've heard the term passive aggressive probably. My notes are stuck together, dang it. All right, got my pages unstuck there. All right, so we were talking about passive versus active aggression. So with active aggression, you have to do something. You have to engage in some new behavior. Whereas with passive aggression, you don't do something to harm somebody. And so some of these will make more sense with examples. So let's say you were trying to harm someone with your car. All right. If you purposely hit someone with your car, that's active. But if you just don't move your car in a way that's going to cause harm to them, that's passive. Also with things like, verbal active versus passive. You can actually say something new and mean and harmful, and it counts as active. Or you can just not say something. Like when you give the silent treatment to somebody, that is a verbal form of passive aggression. All right, so let's give some specific examples. Let's put all of these together. So far with our descriptive typology, we have verbal versus physical, indirect versus direct, passive versus active. So let's start with an example that is physical, active, and direct. Physical, active, and direct. An example of that would be hitting somebody. All right. Hitting, stabbing, beating, kicking, a lot of the classic stuff that we consider aggression that easily is recognizable aggression is physical, active, direct. All right, let's do an example that is physical and direct, but passive. Physical, direct, and passive. That is the example I gave where you just position your car so that they can't get out of a bad situation. That's like, let's say there's like a box in the way of an exit where someone's like, hey, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. And you just leave that box there. All right. You could move it, but you don't. All right. That's different than throwing the box at them. All right. So the passive is like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do this thing. I'm going to lead to a situation where you will be harmed. Now, what about an example that is direct, but verbal? Direct, verbal, and then active versus passive. So direct and verbal and active. Direct, verbal, and active. This could be something like trash talking somebody. All right, trolling somebody. Maybe you're playing an online game and you just start yelling some stuff at somebody to try to hurt their feelings, try to get them to give up, whatever it might be. All right, so that is direct. You are directing it right at them. They know it's coming from you. All right, you are not going through someone else. It's verbal in nature, and it's active because you are doing something new. You are engaging in a new behavior. You are introducing a new behavior to harm them. So what if we have a passive, verbal, direct, active aggression? So we have verbal, direct, passive. An example of that would be the silent treatment example. All right, that's just like, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm going to make you wonder what's going on. It could even be like in an online setting where you're like your teammates, your squad members in a game. You're like, what's going on? And you're mad. Maybe you're mad at one of the teammates. You just stop responding. They're like, well, what's going on? Why? Do you have a bad connection? And you just stop. That's direct. It's from you, directly from you. It's verbal, but it's passive because you're not doing something. All right. And then some people are like, that's not really aggressive. Remember, it doesn't have to be that classic, hitting somebody form of aggression for it to count as aggression. Now let's do some indirect examples. Sometimes students will struggle with indirect because it doesn't seem like the normal sort of thing that you think of. All right. So remember, with indirect aggression, you essentially go through other people. Like, you are not the one that's harming them. They may not even know that you're the one that did it, that you were the aggressor. You go through some other agent for indirect aggression. So let's do an example that is indirect and physical and active. Indirect, physical, active. That's where you get somebody else to beat them up. Maybe you hire a hitman. Don't do that. But if you were to hire a hitman, that would be indirect, physical, active, right? What if you have indirect, physical, but passive? All right, so if it's indirect, it's through someone else. It's got to be physical in nature, but passive, you're not engaging in some action. How could you harm somebody by not acting? This is like someone needs medical care. Like someone is bleeding out in a wartime situation or natural disaster or something, and you have the opportunity, you have the ability to help them, to stop the bleeding, and you don't do it. You just look at them and like, nope, not going to help you because you don't like them, you're mad at them, whatever the case may be. All right, so you fail to act. That's what makes it passive. You could act, you don't act, and that's where the harm comes from. All right. All right, now let's do indirect, verbal. Indirect, verbal. Let's do active. All right. Indirect and verbal, active. That's when you spread rumors. Now, you're not saying it to the person's face. This is not trash talking someone to their face. You go through other people. You get the other people to act more negatively to the person, to spread the rumors, to encourage, harmful beliefs about the person. Right? So it's indirect because you are not going to their face and saying the negative, nasty thing. You are not exhibiting the behaviors to them directly. Now, what if you have indirect, verbal, passive? All right. So, also, still indirect, still verbal. And this is when you don't stick up for somebody verbally. Like, you fail to defend someone who you know is being accused unfairly. All right, lots of situations like that in movies and such where someone's like, oh, should I say something? They didn't actually do it. They're not the ones that should be accused. Like, you fail to speak up. That's passive. And of course, why would somebody not speak up? They're mad at the person, or they secretly or not so secretly want the harm to come to that person. All right. So, and again, when I've talked about students taking tests, there's nothing wrong with having to make a chart. Make a chart or something like, okay, so we can have physical or verbal. We can have indirect or direct. We can have passive versus active. What makes it that way? Because you're going to have some test questions where you have some examples and you're going to have to figure out, okay, in that descriptive typology, what sort of aggression would this be? All right, we have other typologies